Hey guys, this is Brink. This is going to be my video strictly on your orbs on your mid lane Invoker. Managing your orbs is a very important aspect of Invoker, and you can notice a lot of Invoker players be pretty lazy and not want to manage them very well in your lane, and that can really hinder your lane if you don't manage these orbs correctly and make them benefit you as much as possible. So starting off with your Quas orb. Your Quas will give you extra health regen per instance of your orb being up, so you can have 3 orbs above your head at any given time. As soon as you put a level into one of your abilities for the first time, you'll unlock this orb and be able to use it for extra attributes. So if you have a Quas level, you can hit Quas 3 times, it will give you 3 orbs, and what a Quas orb does is give you extra HP regen, as I said. Another thing to note is you can have different color orbs above your head. You don't have to have 3 of the same at every point in the game. But for the early game and even the late game really, having 3 Quas orbs above your head when you're missing a lot of health is probably the way to go, because you're going to want to get your health back, of course, right? So it's probably best to have 3 Quas orbs above your head if you're looking to regen. Moving on to your Wex orb. So your Wex orb, based on what level it is, it'll give more, but its base attributes that it gives you is attack speed and movement speed. So using Wex for attack speed is pretty good in certain scenarios. If you're wanting to cold snap a target a bunch of times, you're going to want more attack speed. So once you put a cold snap on somebody, you can switch to Wex if you want, if you have more levels in your Wex. But if you're an Exhort focused build, you might just want the extra damage from Exhort, as we'll go into later on. But Wex is mainly used for the movement speed aspect. Once you have a very high level in your Wex, you will run around very fast, and having Ghost Walk up at a later stage of the game, you'll move, I think, at haste, at fastest movement speed, depending on your item build. But it's pretty ridiculous how much speed you get from Wex, so if you need more movement speed, always put Wex above your head, or even attack speed in the early laning stage as a Quas X Invoker. It helps to have Wex up above your head even 3 times rather than Quas if you're not missing much health or missing health at all, as it'll make lasting a lot easier just having the extra attack speed. Finally, your last orb is called Exhort. It is that yellow one at the end there. What Exhort really does is give you extra damage. So if you have 3 Exhort orbs above your head, you're going to have a ton of extra damage compared to if you had 1 Exhort orb and 2 Quas, or 3 Quas, or 3 Wex. This is basically what all of your laning is focused on for Quas Exhort Invoker, as you're going to have all of your Exhort orbs up most of the time for CSing, and between your CSing and your downtime of CSing, you're going to usually have your Quas for your extra regen. So going over this interaction in your laning stage, you're going to want usually Exhort up if you're an Exhort build. This is going to give you more damage for harassment, other uses for CSing like last hitting, denying, and like that. More damage is always good in the mid lane. HP, if you're missing it, you're going to want your Quas orbs up again. And if you're needing attack speed in a Quas Wex build, you can throw the Wex orbs up, but you're going to usually be focused rather on having Quas above your head or Exhort in many cases. So managing these orbs between the CSing, like I was talking about earlier, is very important, and I don't think any Invoker player should hinder themselves by not paying attention to this aspect of Invoker. It's one of Invoker's strongest points. It allows you to control how much sustain you have in your lane, how much damage you're going to do, and really benefit you a lot more than if you just ignored it. So definitely take the time to learn how to switch your orbs very quickly. After every CS, I like to just tab my Quas 3 times really, unless there's another CS coming up right away, and just get that extra little bit of regen. Even if it's not much, an extra 20 health can really matter. So definitely think into it and think of when you can actually use your Quas to give you extra HP rather than just staying on Exhort for damage. As for your spell usage, your orbs are going to be quite a mess during the whole game really, because they're going to be constantly switching due to the spells that you're invoking. You're just going to really want to input whatever spell you're wanting to use as a whole rather than trying to use orbs from the previous one. It's probably a lot easier to keep track of unless you're going to delve really into it and go for combining your orb progression with the next spell you're using, but it's probably not that efficient to think about. So your orbs are going to work if you haven't played Invoker before. Based on what spells you're going to be using, you're going to have certain orbs above your head before you press your Invoke spell, which is your ultimate. So going over Invoker's spells, we'll start off with Cold Snap. So Cold Snap is invoked when you have 3 Quas Orbs above your head and you press your Invoke ultimate button. Cold Snap is a really good lockdown spell, really good single target because it's single target focused, and it can really hinder an enemy's positioning and just make them very susceptible to your team helping you out or just your own damage in general. Next, we'll go with Ghost Walk. Ghost Walk is invoked by having 2 Quas Orbs above your head as well as 1 Wex Orb. Ghost Walk is going to make you invisible, and it is very, very good for surviving ganks that are incoming. It has a decently high mana cost, but it's going to get you out of a lot of tricky situations. Next up, we'll go with Ice Wall. Ice Wall is invoked through having 2 Quas Orbs and 1 Exhort Orb above your head. Ice Wall is an AoE damaging and slow spell. It just creates a wall of ice, and you can use it on a whole enemy team at once if you get good positioning on it. It's very good for controlling your enemy and doing an extra little bit of damage over time. Next spell we'll go over is Tornado. Tornado is invoked with 2 Wex Orbs and 1 Quas Orb above your head. Tornado is a very good initiation tool. It can catch an entire team in it and set up for a lot of pretty nasty ultimates that can come your opponent's way, and even your own spells, of course, as well. Moving on, there is Deafening Blast. Deafening Blast is invoked by having 1 of each orb above your head and pressing your invoke key, of course. Deafening Blast is a targeted, slightly, I guess it's AoE. It's a targeted in a direction, whatever you pick to click, and it's an AoE blast that will disarm your enemy and push them back a short distance. Deafening Blast also does a decent chunk of damage, so it's a good damaging spell. Next up is Forged Spirit. Forged Spirits are invoked through having 2 Exhort Orbs above your head and 1 Quas. Definitely used on Quas Exhort Invoker mostly in the mid lane and even throughout your game just for split pushing. When you have 4 points in your Quas and 4 points in your Exhort, you're going to have 2 Forged Spirits spawn instead of 1, so it's always nice to go for that build if you're going Quas Exhort. Moving on to EMP. EMP is invoked through having 3 Wex Orbs above your head. EMP is a large AoE spell that will steal opponents' mana from them and give some back to yourself. Next up is Alacrity. Alacrity is invoked through having 2 Wex Orbs and 1 Exhort Orb. Alacrity is very good in the early laning stage as well as late game, as having a maxed out Exhort and maxed out Wex can make Alacrity a very, very potent spell and make pushing a lot easier using Necronomicons, units in general, or even your own heroes, of course. Almost there to the end, Chaos Meteor, invoked through 2 Exhort Orbs, 1 Wex Orb. Chaos Meteor is one of, if not the most high damaging spells that you have as Invoker, depending on if they would stay in it the whole time at least. Chaos Meteor is strictly a damage spell. It causes damage on impact and damage over time. And last but definitely not least, a large focus of Quas Exhort Invoker, of course, is the iconic Sunstrike in Dota. Sunstrike is used strictly through Exhort. Exhort Orbs, all 3 of them above your head, you press Invoke, you'll get your Sunstrike. So Sunstrike is the AoE global targeted damage spell. Depending on how many units you hit, the damage will be split evenly across all units hit. So if you hit 1 hero with a Sunstrike, it's going to do the full damage to that 1 hero. If you hit a hero and the creep, it's going to be split between them. So Sunstriking a single target that you need to do a ton of damage to is very beneficial, of course. So listing all of these spells, there's a decent amount of them. There's 10 spells total. But I know it can be pretty intimidating at first when you're listening to this and you're like, oh, there's so many spells on this hero. How will I even remember them? Each of them have these different codes you have to put in, things like that. Everybody starts there. You have to start somewhere if you want to get it. All it takes is a lot of repetition, a lot of practice. I remember my first game of Invoker, I strictly used Tornado only, and it did not go very well. But I kept going and I learned, and now I can play Invoker and I can just use spells based on what I want to use. If I want to use a Ice Wall, I'll just know to press QQE and I'll invoke Ice Wall, things like that. It'll just become muscle memory and it'll get a lot easier as you progress with the hero. So just keep at it. If you're having any trouble, you can always post in the comments below. Once again, I'm Brink. This has been the video on Invoker's Orbs and the Orb management. Hopefully it helped, and thank you very much for watching.